Welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into one of history's absolute darkest chapters. We're going to look at a truly terrifying psychological shift. How did ordinary, highly trained doctors end up committing just unspeakable atrocities? Well, during World War II, Japan ran a top-secret facility in occupied China called Unit 731. And inside those walls, thousands of men, women, and even children became human test subjects. They were deliberately infected with deadly diseases, and others were dissected.
Alive. Yeah, they weren't studied after they died. This happened while they were fully conscious.
And with absolutely no anesthesia. None. Why? Well, according to the researchers, it's because they wanted to study the human body in real time. The perverse logic behind all this is just staggering. They literally thought painkillers would just interfere with their data, so they skipped them. And that sets up our main psychological mystery for today. How on earth could educated medical professionals, people sworn to save lives, do something so barbaric? For decades after the war, most of the world didn't even know this happened.
Section 1. The Hidden Death Factory. Imperial Japan's Darkest Secret.
So let's look at how this whole system actually got built. In the 1930s, Imperial Japan is rapidly expanding across Asia. By the mid-30s, military leaders are becoming totally obsessed with biological warfare. They're actively looking for weapons that can wipe out entire populations. Enter Shiro Ishii in the late 30s. He's a brilliant but completely ruthless military doctor, and he manages to convince the government to fund human experimentation, setting up this massive secret research division in Manchuria. Unit 731 basically operated as a factory of death. And the victims? It was a totally indiscriminate stream of people. We're talking Chinese civilians, political prisoners, captured soldiers, even children. Once you went through those doors, you almost never came out alive.
Section 2. Erasing Humanity. The Power of Language.
Now, this is absolutely crucial to understanding how they did it. It's the very first step in their psychological descent, changing the words they used. The researchers actually referred to their victims entirely as logs. It sounds bizarre, right? But it's a profound psychological trick. You empathize with a human being, but a log is just raw material. It's something you process, study, and throw away. That one single word fundamentally allowed these doctors to detach themselves from the murder they were committing. Section 3. When cruelty becomes routine, the experiments. Once the victims were stripped of their humanity, they faced unimaginable, everyday cruelty. They were deliberately infected with things like plague, cholera, and anthrax, just so doctors could watch their bodies deteriorate. They had their limbs frozen and smashed with sticks, literally just to hear if they sounded like wood. They were put in pressure chambers until their eyes burst from their skulls. And of course, the vivisections without painkillers. And here is where the cognitive dissonance hits its peak. On one hand, researchers described a work atmosphere that was disturbingly ordinary. People are eating meals, laughing with coworkers, just going about their day. But on the other hand, literally just rooms away, medical professionals are calmly dissecting conscious people. The cruelty didn't just happen, it was completely normalized. Section 4. Unleashing biological terror beyond the laboratory. But these atrocities didn't just stay confined to the lab. They actually took this data and built highly functional biological weapons. Japanese aircraft dropped plague-infected fleas over Chinese cities. They deliberately contaminated local food and water supplies. They even intentionally released infected prisoners just to study how the diseases would transmit in the wild. Entire villages became engineered outbreak zones without having any idea what was happening to them. Tens of thousands. That staggering number is what historians estimate for the civilian death toll from those engineered outbreaks alone. Just imagine living in a town where a devastating sickness suddenly wipes out your community, and it's all just part of a sterile, orchestrated military experiment. Section 5. The post-war cover-up, trading justice for data. When the war was finally ending, the Japanese military scrambled to hide all of this. It was a desperate cover-up. They burned the documents, demolished the buildings, and they immediately executed every single remaining prisoner just to erase the evidence from history. Now, the post-war reality is deeply, deeply uncomfortable. You'd expect these perpetrators to face justice, right? Like the Nazi war criminals did. But instead, United States intelligence really wanted that biological warfare data. Prioritizing their advantage in the looming Cold War, the U.S. secretly offered immunity from prosecution to the Unit 731 researchers, meaning the men who committed some of history's absolute worst medical experiments completely avoided justice. They went on to live totally normal lives as respected doctors, professors, and businessmen. So, how did morality collapse so completely? Section 6, the psychology of atrocity, the banality of evil.
Let's analyze the most terrifying part of this entire explainer, the minds of the people who did this. They weren't insane, mustache-twirling monsters. That's the scariest part. They were highly educated professionals, scientists, administrators, doctors. So how do you justify it? Well, they convinced themselves it was all acceptable for patriotism, for scientific progress, and out of a sense of blind obedience to the system. We can systematically map out exactly how human empathy gets dismantled. First, you dehumanize the victims, call them logs. Second, you reward extreme cruelty by framing it as a scientific achievement. And third, you normalize those atrocities through everyday institutional routine until horrific violence literally just feels like another day at the office. And this brings us to the ultimate psychological takeaway. Under certain systems, human beings can normalize almost anything. That is the true horror of Unit 731. It's a dark reminder that some of history's greatest atrocities were committed not by monsters, but by ordinary people who just stopped seeing others as human. Which leaves us with this final, provocative thought. Unit 731 is one of the darkest examples of what can happen when science loses its humanity. What happens when the pursuit of knowledge becomes more important than human life? Think about how easily morality collapsed inside that environment, and what it takes from all of us to ensure a system like this never, ever happens again.